This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. With free weekly content and free shipping over $100, you can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. I'm also sponsored by Face to Face Games, Canada's premier Magic the Gathering store. Using the promo code MTGMudsta will get you 5% off site-wide, with eligible orders getting free shipping Canada-wide. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, make sure you stay to the end of the video to check out a cool card game that I demo called Sic'ret. Hey gang and welcome back. Today's game finds us back at Gamebreakers with me playing Mistform. I keep Mirage Mirror, Ghost Quarter, 2 islands, Swan Song, Arcane Denial, and Inundate. Max is playing Kumena, keeping an island, a Simic Signet, a Simic Guildgate, a Sigiled Starfish, a Sic'ret Tribe Elder, Mana Leak, and Thrasios. Neil is playing Grenzo, keeping Opal Palace, Swamp, Goblin Charbelcher, Bloodfell Caves, Rakdos Guildgate, Puppeteer Clique, and a Big Game Hunter. Peter is rocking Grothama, keeping a Destiny Spinner, Nice's Pilgrimage, Hornet's Nest, Arachnogenesis, Thragtusk, and 2 forests. Neil wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a tap Bloodfell Caves, gaining 1. Peter plays a forest. I play an island. Max draws and plays a tapped Thornwood Falls, gaining 1 as it comes in. Neil plays a tapped Rakdos Guildgate, passing. Peter has another forest and casts a Destiny Spinner. I play a Ghost Quarter and pass. Max has an island and casts Farseek, going to find a breeding pool while he passes. Neil has a swamp for turn and casts Feldon the Third Path. Peter plays another forest and casts a Nice's Pilgrimage, finding a forest for the field and 1 for his hand. Moving to combat, the Destiny Spinner goes at Max for 2 and he passes turn. I draw, play an island, and cast Mirage Mirror. Max has a tapped Simic Guildgate and casts a Simic Signet, and then uses it to cast a Sigiled Starfish. Neil draws and plays an Opal Palace. He then casts Grenzo where X is 2, he then moves to combat and swings Feldon at me for 2. Peter plays a forest and casts a Thragtusk, gaining 5 as it comes in. Moving to combat, he swings the Destiny Spinner at me for 2 and passes. I have an island for turn and bring up Mistform Ultimus. Max draws and in his main phase casts Kadama's Reach, finding a forest and an island, and playing the island for turn. He then plays out Kumena and passes after that. Neil draws and plays a Lavaclaw Reaches, passing. Peter has to traverse the Outlands in his main phase and gets to grab 5 forests thanks to his beefy Thragtusk. With nothing else, he ships the turn. I draw, but with no land to play, pass the turn, while Max scries on my end step with a Starfish. Max draws and plays Thrasios. He then passes, and during his end step, Neil activates Grenzo twice, hitting a land and a Heartstone into the graveyard. Neil plays a Swamp for turn and casts a Soul Ring. He then drops Goblin Charbelcher and passes turn. Peter draws and plays a Tireless Tracker. He then plays a forest and makes a clue token. After that, he casts a Rast of the Endless Web and goes to combat. He swings the Thragtusk at Max, dealing 5, who takes the hit. I draw and play an island. I then pass, with Max activating Thrasios on my end step, and gets to put an island into play, and then scries with the Starfish. Max draws and plays a Sic'ret Tribe Elder. He passes the turn, and on his end step, Neil activates the Charbelcher and targets the Tyler's Tracker. Peter cracks his clue in response to buff the tracker, and Neil flips into a mountain off the top, but deals no damage. Neil draws and plays a mountain. He activates the Belcher again on the tracker, this time flipping 5 creatures and then a mountain for a whopping 10 damage. The tracker really dies, and Neil then reorders his creatures on the bottom of his library. With nothing else, he passes. Peter plays Selvala Heart of the Wilds in his main phase, and then goes to cast Grothama. He then plays a forest and moves to combat. He swings the Thragtusk at Neil, and Neil responds by activating Grenzo to put Ob Nixilis Unshackled into play. He then activates Grenzo again for Zulborg Cutthroat, and then once more for Fleshbag Marauder. We all sacrifice a creature, which in Peter's case is the attacking Thragtusk. We also all get drained 1 from the Cutthroat. After that, Peter passes, and during his end step, I flash in Venser to bounce Obnixilis back to Neil's hand. I draw and cast a Relic of Progenitus in my main phase, and Max responds by casting Croson Grip and targets the Charbelcher. After that, I pass, with Max scrying 1 on my end step thanks to the Starfish. Max draws and plays an island. He casts Eternal Witness, returning to hand the Croson Grip, and passes. Neil draws and plays a Swamp. He casts a Big Game Hunter and targets Grothama, which takes Peter's commander out. He then activates Grenzo once more for a Merciless Executioner, and we all sacrifice a creature and get drained for 1 once more. With nothing else, Neil passes. Peter plays a Forest and recasts his commander, drawing off of Selvala. He then activates her for 10 green mana, and uses some of it for Kolga, and targets Feldon with a fight trigger as it comes in. Neil responds by activating Feldon, and targets a Big Game Hunter. Peter responds to this by casting Stetson Tactics on his Aratsa, Beast Token, and Destiny Spinner, and then taps the Destiny Spinner to fight the Zulborg Cutthroat and kill it. He then uses Arasta to fight Grenzo, and the Beast Token to fight Thrasios, and still responding to his own trigger, bounces Destiny Spinner to Kolga's second ability to make it indestructible. After all that, Peter then passes, and on his end step, I crack the Relic to draw a card and exile all graveyards. I then Wizard Cycle Step Through to find Azami. I draw and play a Cavern of Souls, naming Merfolks, and then cast Inundate. I then pass to Max, who scries 1 once more and puts it on the bottom. Max draws and casts Archetype of Imagination, moving to combat. He swings Kumena at Peter, dealing 2 commander damage, and passing. Neil draws and plays a Swamp. He then recasts Grenzo where X is 2 again, and passes. Peter draws and recasts the Destiny Spinner, Selvala, and then Kolga. And with Kolga re-entering, fights Grenzo once more. Neil then activates Grenzo in response, and flips into a Tuk-Tuk Scrapper, blowing up my Mirage Mirror and dealing 1 to me. He then activates with Grenzo again, but hits a mountain, and Grenzo then dies. Peter then draws a card from Selvala, and plays a Forest, and casts a Hornet's Nest before passing. I draw and play Griffin Canyon, and then play out a Galecaster Colossus. Max responds at this point with a mana leak, and I can't pay for it, and it gets countered. I then pass, with Max scrying 1 with the Starfish. Max draws and plays a Deep-Root Elite, and then a Seafloor Oracle. He puts the +1/+1 counter from the Elite onto Kumena, and swings his commander at Peter, dealing 3 more commander damage. He gets to draw from the Oracle, and then pass his turn. Neil draws and plays Obnixilis, and then recasts Merciless Executioner. Max scries in response, and we all then sacrifice a creature, and Neil passes. Peter draws and recasts Grothama, drawing once more off Selvala. He then needs only pay 2 mana for a Ghalta, and once it's out, activates Selvala for 12 green mana, casting an Evolutionary Leap and a Scoot Swarm, which Max responds to by using Croson Grip and targets the leap. Peter then plays a land and makes a Scoot Swarm, and then recasts Arasta and goes to combat. He swings Kolga and the Destiny Spinner at Max, and destroys the Archetype of Imagination with the Kolga on attack trigger. He also has them both fight Grothama. Peter then draws 9 cards, and after combat, casts Garruk Wildspeaker, upticking the Walker to untap 2 lands, and passes. I draw and play a Sol Ring, and then cast Imprison in the Moon and target Selvala. I then play out Azami and pass to Max. Max draws and plays a Mistcaller. He then plays out Biden of Thassa and goes to combat, making Kumena unblockable by tapping some Merfolk and swinging the Seafloor Oracle and Deep-Root Elite at me and Kumena at Peter. Before damage, Peter responds by casting Arachnogenesis, making 1 Spider. With the attack fogged, Max passes. Neil draws and plays a Swamp. He then recasts Grenzo where X is 3 and moves to combat. Neil swings Obnixilis at Peter and deals 11 thanks to the Flying Trampling Demon. After that, he passes turn. Peter draws and plays an Oran Reef, which comes in tapped, but does make him more Scoot Swarms. He then plays a Swiftfoot Boots and a Goreclaw, equipping the boots onto the bear. With the equip on the stack, Neil responds by activating Grenzo twice and hits a land and a Grey Merchant of Asphodel. We all get drained for 6, and he gains that much life. Peter then activates Garruk to untap Oran Reef, and activates it to put a +1/+1 counter onto Goreclaw and the scoots that just came in. He then plays Overwhelming Stampede, and Max responds by activating the Bident to force Peter to attack. Peter then moves to combat, swinging lethal at Neil and a Rast at Max, who deals 16. After that, he passes, and I tap Azami to draw a card. I draw for turn, and draw another one with Azami again. I then play a Trophy Mage, and go and grab a Diviner's Wand, which I play. After that, I pass to Max. Max draws, and makes Kumena unblockable again, and swings it at Peter, and the Deeproot Elite and Seafloor Oracle go again at me. Peter and I both take our hits, and Max draws 2 cards per creature that hit. He then casts a Surge Spanner, and then an Aeromoeboid, and passes to Peter. Peter draws, and plays a Forest, making another Scoops Worm, and equipping it with the boots. He then downticks Garruk to Overrun, and goes to combat. He swings out his team at Max and Max attempts to use the Surge Spanner to bounce Gelta. Peter responds by casting Return of the Wildspeaker to give his team an additional +3/+3, which is extra lethal to both Max and wins out the game. Game review time. When I first started playing EDH back in 2011, I don't think I would have picked mono green as being one of the most aggressive and powerful colors in Magic. It seems like nowadays it does everything really well, and Grothama really showcased that. Peter was able to ramp a ton, easily remove creatures, and draw a ton of cards. In comparison, my mono blue deck, which a lot of people I think would agree with me would probably be the strongest color in Magic since it has counterspells, didn't do a whole heck of a lot. That might be because of how I built the deck, but it could also just be that things have changed over the years. The Kumena deck that Max played was actually Neil's girlfriend's deck, and it was heavily influenced by the theme of sea creatures and beach-dwelling things and stuff like that, which is why you saw the Sigiled Starfish and Merfolks. Neil's actual deck, Grenzo Dungeon Warden, was definitely what I've come to expect from Grenzo nowadays. Lots of powerful interactions that he's able to get off the bottom of his library and cheat the cost of. And I thought his inclusion of Goblin Charbelcher was a pretty sweet piece of tech since it allows you to order the cards in the bottom of your library in any way you want. So if you stuck around to the end of the video, you're here because you want to see what Sic'em is all about. The concept is pretty cool and likely something you're familiar with. Each player picks a character, and you're essentially battling by summoning beasts of varied levels of power each round. Each character has a different ability that can only be used once per round and for a maximum of twice per game. These abilities can vary from reducing power to straight up denying another person's ability. You show power being used by rotating the character card to the respective number of times you've used it. For the creature cards, they number 1 through 10. There are 10 rounds, and a First Blood mechanic to help with the tiebreaks at the end of the game. Each round consists of players picking a card from their hand and placing it face down. Certain abilities are able to be activated, and once agreed upon, you all turn the cards face up. The highest power wins the round. In the case of a tie between the power of cards, the players who aren't tied discard their cards, while the players who tied return them to her hand and play out an extra round. If the results of the round is also a tie, that round is ended and no points are awarded. There's also what's known as a David and Goliath rule, meaning that during any round, if there's a card with 1 power and a card with 10 power, the card with 1 power will win the round regardless of abilities being used as well. While not an official rule, we decided to roll to see who would pick their character first, with Neil winning and picking the Mad Scientist. The Mad Scientist's ability allows Neil to bounce any creature card back to their controller's hand. That player then shuffles and randomly selects a new one to put to the field. I pick the Tracker, whose ability, when activated, lets me lower the power of a face-up card by 1. And true to life, Max picks the Judge card. The Judge comes with 2 additional cards, known as Fate cards. Once per turn, the Judge may choose to play one of their Fate cards face down, before players put down their creature cards face down as well. When the creatures are turned face up, the Fate card is as well. Creatures with power indicated in the range on the Fate card are discarded before the numbers are then compared. And picking last, Peter takes the Seer. Once per turn, a Seer is able to look at a face down card before they're revealed, and if he so chooses, change the card he's played for one in his hand. This might sound like a lot to take in, but honestly, after having the game and the cards explained once, we picked it up very quickly, with games lasting between 10 and 15 minutes. For round 1, it starts off easily, with Neil winning by playing out his 10. He gets the first blood token. Round 2 goes to Max as he reveals a 9 power card. Round 3 looks like Peter will win it, but Neil activates his Mad Scientist ability, returning the card to Peter's hand. Peter shuffles it up and reveals a 5, which lets Neil steal the round. For round 4, Max declares he'll use a fake card before we set our creatures out. We then reveal our cards, and Max shows the fake card to discard creature cards with power between 6 and 10 on them. First though, we have a 3-way tie with 5 power between Max, Neil, and myself. I use my tracker's ability to turn Neil's 5 into a 4, knocking him out of the tiebreakers, but Neil doesn't like this and uses the last of his Mad Scientist's ability to bounce my 5 back to hand. This has me putting out my 10, which is then discarded as we resolve Max's judge ability, and Max wins it with his 5 card. Round 5 has Peter using the Seer ability before we reveal, and he looks at Neil's card. He then swaps the card he played for another one from his hand. We then reveal them, with Neil and I playing 9s, and Max having a lower card, while Peter has a 10. I tap the tracker for the last of its abilities to make Peter's 10 into a 9, and we move to resolve a 3-way tie. This has Peter, Neil, and I putting our cards back to hand and having an extra round. Peter wins in the tiebreak, making me the only player without any points at this point. Round 6 starts with Peter using his last Seer ability to look at Neil's card. Once more he swaps a card, and we reveal with Peter having swapped to his 10. This would normally work out well, except Max has played at a 1, and he wins the round via the David and Goliath rule. Round 7 goes quickly without any abilities, and Max wins it with his 10. Round 8 has another 3-way tie between Peter, Max, and myself with our 9s. This has Neil discarding his card, and we put the cards back to hand to play out the extra round tiebreaker. Max wins this by playing his 9. Round 9 has Max using the ability again to play a fake card, and reveals the 6 and 10 again. This wrecks Peter and I, but he does tie with Neil as they both played 4s. They move to the tiebreaks, with Max winning with a 7. Round 10 is our last round, and Peter and I tie. Because we have to do a bonus round, and we only have the same card, the round is nullified because it's a tie again, and I end up with no points, while Max wins the game with a total of 6. So hopefully people enjoyed that. I love board games, I love card games beyond just Magic, and being able to film and play them and show them to you is something I'm hoping to do more of in the future. Sic'em was created by my buddy Peter, who runs Fool's Gaming, and you can buy the game if you're interested over on their website. I wasn't paid to say this, I just wanted to share my enjoyment of this game with you all.